The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Onyx Fantasies. On the promo code SGPN to score up to $250 in bonus cash. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Get your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblers.com/RATHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is currently Sunday afternoon, roughly 2 p.m. Eastern Time on August 18th. I'm Rosso, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. The second episode of the day. We recorded an episode a couple hours ago for the semifinal matches in Cincinnati. However, there is an ATP event starting, the last one before the U.S. Open, which will be a pretty interesting and fun event in Winston-Salem. So we're going to preview that event in this episode. So once again, expect to see a bit of chaos, a lot of potential upsets, and a lot of potential Cinderella runs in a 250 that, historically speaking, has featured a lot of, let's just say, unexpected winners over the years. Before we get into any of the actual preview for the outrights, before we get into the lock picks for the first round at the end of the episode, I want to remind people once again to like, subscribe on YouTube. Also, reminder, don't forget to review the podcast on Spotify or Apple. So if you're still listening to the podcast audio only, you can still show support by rating and reviewing on Spotify or Apple. And if you are still listening to the show on YouTube, either in video format afterwards or during the live stream, don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to leave a comment so we know that you are enjoying the show. Either way, though, also a reminder, check out the SGPN merch store. Check out the Tennis Gambling Podcast merch portion of the merch store, because we have a lot of great Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have shirts, sweatshirts, and mugs. Very cheap, very affordable, and I think the shirt's very comfortable. So I recommend you get yourself something. And we have a great deal with the network right now, because if you go to the merch store and use the promo code FOOTBALL, everything on the merch store is 10% off. So if you want to get yourself a Tennis Gambling Podcast shirt or sweatshirt, you can now get 10% off the price. Anyway, nothing to really recap, though, for the lock and dog, because we recapped everything in the Cincinnati episode. So really not anything to dive into for the sake of this recap portion of the show. If we want to briefly talk about the women's side, I saw that Sabalenka beat Swiatek today. Early on Sunday, so a nice straight sets win for her. Swiatek was struggling for most of the event. She was able to get by, but she was dropping some sets. So I can't say I'm totally shocked that she ended up losing to Sabalenka. I might be shocked by the margin that it was 6-3, 6-3. But nice win for her, and I see Pegula right now is up 4-1 in the first set against Badoza. Besides that, nothing really else to talk about. I'm trying to think if there's anything news-related that's worth mentioning. And I really can't think of anything. I'm trying to think if there's anything I might have missed in the Cincinnati episode, and I don't really think I missed anything. So quickly trying to check ESPN, though, to see if there's any news I should have known about. The other news is that Vondrousova is officially going to be out of the U.S. Open on the women's side. Not saying she was going to win. The point is she's not going to be participating in the event. Besides that, of course, Goff got upset in Cincinnati. That happened a couple days ago. Dimmenauer did say he's going to play in the U.S. Open despite battling a hip issue. So after missing the Olympics and getting injured in Wimbledon, we did see that he announced he's going to play in the U.S. Open. So kind of the news there. Nothing else to recap, though. So time to get into the actual preview of Winston-Salem. Now, I am going to admit the matches actually start for the first round in about 20 minutes. So apologies if you end up listening to this and the outright market's closed. Sorry, I was waiting for the lines for Winston-Salem for a day or so. Finally got posted at 6 in the morning, and I just didn't have the time to actually make an episode until now. So apologies there. To get into, though, the actual start of the breakdown for the event, got to start off with the recent winners. Now, once again, it is a 250, and it's the event right before the U.S. Open. So a lot of the star players, the highly ranked players, have been playing Montreal and Cincinnati, the two 1,000 events, and obviously they're going to skip over this one to get ready for the U.S. Open. So expect to see a lot of decent ATP players, but no superstars, which should result in what could be a very fun and very unpredictable tournament itself, which is usually the case every year. Now, to go through the recent winners, to prove what I just said, Baez won a hardcourt event last year, as he won in Winston-Salem, beat Leheshka in the final. You saw Manarino, who ended up beating De Geer the year prior. Ivashka ended up beating Emer. Forgot about Ivashka. Haven't heard his name in years, but he ended up winning a title against Emer in the final. And Hurkacz beat Paire in the final a couple of years ago. So as you can tell, a lot of different names. You've had no repeat finalists over the last couple of years, and it has been really a coin flip of, or I should just say, a lottery draw of who you think is going to win the event. Because usually it's unpredictable. The field itself is full of a lot of guys with upside who could potentially make a deep run, but we don't really know if they're capable of actually getting over the finish line, because they could, in theory, lose to a bunch of guys in this field. I'm going to read off the odds in a second, but you can tell where I'm going with this. A lot of guys who maybe you could see either winning the event or maybe making a deep run into losing, but there really are no, in my opinion, surefire bets to actually make to win the event. I'm going to give out a couple of guys that I think have some value with the current price, but there are no guys like Alcaraz or Sinner or any of these guys who are clear head and shoulders above everybody else. The favorite in this event's around like 8 or 9 to 1, which tells you that it's going to be an extremely fun and unpredictable tournament, and hopefully we end up picking the right outright winner. Plus, as you can tell from the actual list of winners that I have right here, no repeat winner that actually dates back over 10 years. The last time a player won this tournament in back-to-back years, it was Isner in 2011 and 2012. So it's been roughly 12 years since a player's won back-to-back times here in Winston-Salem. So Baez's chances of repeating, let's just say, are slim to, I don't want to say none, but they're slim. Let's put it that way. So expect, once again, a fun tournament. We're going to break it down. Unfortunately, though, no quarter odds. Did not have that. So we are going to be going right into the actual outright picks and the outright odds to win the event. So it's going to be a pretty short episode for the outrights, but apologies, no quarters, nothing I can do about that. Anyway, before we get into any of the actual outright breakdowns for this event, I want to remind you once again, they're brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, because you can now use the Underdog Pick'em to have a chance to win 1,000 times your entry. Or play fantasy football the right way with Best Ball Mania. Best Ball Mania is now live with $50 million in prizes, get nice specials, and boost on all flex entries. I'll probably end up using something with WNBA for today. Trying to remember what Skylar Diggins-Smith. I like her higher PA in her matchup against the Fever. Even though the Fever have been better lately, they still can't guard anybody. I think Diggins-Smith has a solid game. Anyway, sign up with the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and first time deposit offer of our bonus cash on fantasy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Circuit 5 and Circuit Millions. Circuit Sports is back with Circuit 5 and Circuit Millions, giving away $16 million guaranteed prizes. And you should go to Vegas if you have not done so already before football, because ultimately concerts weekends are a great time to go. You can hang out with Ryan and Sean and enjoy some of the bombardments in the World of Sports Talk from August 22nd through the 24th. And a reminder, if you use the promo code SGP15, you save 15% off your hotel room for sign-up weekend. And a reminder, sign up in person at Circuit Sports in order to actually participate in the contest between now and September 7th. Use Proxy for anywhere. We also have a deal with Proxy. If you go to proxy.footballcontest.com, we can save $50 with the promo code SGP, and you also receive a free hat. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished briefly introducing the actual tournament in Winston-Salem. Now it's time for the actual breakdown for the outright odds. Once again, with no clear favorites, shop around, try to find the best line available. And apologies once again if you are listening to this when the match has already started for Sunday. It was the only time I had in my schedule, so apologies. But either way, we are going to go through the outrights right now. Going through the outrights, we're going to be using FanDuel for the odds on this one, but I'm going to mention some other alternative lines if there are players that I like, and I'm going to mention better prices. So Shang is actually the favorite right now at 8 to 1, who's never won a title, has been playing some good tennis, though, made a pretty solid run in the last event he was in. Then he got injured. Well, I should say he made a deep run in Atlanta, lost to Thompson in the semis. Then he ended up showing up and got injured immediately after against Rinderknecht and had to retire. So he's had some time off. Hopefully he's healthy, but he's the favorite here at about 8 to 1. Cerundolo is at 10 to 1, fresh off of the destruction that he ended up having suffered against Kashanov in his last match. Baez, defending champion, is 11 to 1. Safulin 16 to 1. Rinderknecht is 19 to 1. You have Borges at 19 to 1 as well. For the actual other options here, Mickelson's at 19 to 1. You have Morozin at 19 to 1. Opelka's at 22 to 1. Busta's 24 to 1. Echeverry's 24 to 1. Chorich is 24 to 1. You can shop around, though, find better prices. You can find Sonigo at 29 to 1. Shevchenko 36 to 1. Mutet 36 to 1. Fuksovic's 36 to 1. Eubanks 36 to 1. Hichikata 36 to 1. A bunch of other guys who I'm not really giving a chance to. I'll mention a couple other names, though. You have Darderi at 36 to 1. You have Kotov at 36 to 1. Vukic 38 to 1. Goffin at 45 to 1. And you have Dzanchulp at 45 to 1. Anyway, so going through the actual odds here, do have a couple of names that kind of caught my eye. So looking at the actual draw itself, you might see a pretty, once again, unpredictable overall tournament that's in store for us. So we have to try to find the best overall path for players based on price. So there were some books, by the way, that had Cerundolo as the favorite, and some books that had Shang as the favorite. FanDuel was one of them that had Shang as the favorite. Other books, most books, have Shang at around 10 to 1. Give or take. I mentioned before that FanDuel had about 8 to 1. You can shop around and find a better price. And Vice versa, you can find worse prices on Cerundolo, who is the favorite on some other books. Anyway, point is for the actual draw. To go through the favorite here, you have Shang, who has a very, very nice draw. Now, in the first round, it's against Komensanya, who has not faced off against anybody on hard court since the Australian Open qualifying. And as for the rest of the path, he has Navone, who has a bye, which is hilarious. Navone has a bye in this event, and he's never won a hard court match in his entire life. So that's pretty amusing to me, but the point is Shang, if he gets by Komensanya, he's a decent favorite there. Basically has a bye, as far as I'm concerned, in the second round, which is definitely, I'd say, fortunate for him. Then he'd have to face off against probably Sonego. Could, in theory, be Stricker, but the point is decent draw there for him. Then he'd have to face off against, in theory, Cerundolo or Kotov. That could be interesting. Both guys, though, are on a bye in the first round. Cerundolo, though, could lose to De Geer in the second round. That wouldn't totally shock me, as De Geer actually made a final here a couple years ago. So I think Shang's path that is actually pretty good, and I think that he has a more favorable path than, for example, Cerundolo. Because I think that De Geer could beat Cerundolo. Cerundolo has played one hardcourt match in months, and he got destroyed by Kashanov, who has not been in great form, as we've seen. Point is, I think for the sake of my first choice, I am going to go with Shang. He's very good. Just simply put, we saw him make a good run in Atlanta, did get injured, had a back issue, lost to Thompson in 3. I think the 10-1 is a good price for a guy with a lot of upside. I believe he's made a couple deep runs this year, so I think that he's capable of actually getting over the finish line. But with the tournament that's pretty up in the air, and with a guy that has a lot of upside, I like the draw quite a bit. Komensanya in the first round, followed by Navone in the second round, is a borderline dream draw, especially Navone in the second round. So give me Shang at 10-1 as my first choice here for the outrights. My second choice actually would be Safulin, a guy that I've liked on the show for a while. Has not had a great year. He was definitely better last year, but I like his path as well. Now, his path isn't as good as Shang's. I think Shang has a very, very solid draw. But Safulin's on the bottom. You're looking at him against either Moutet or McDonald in the second round after a bye in the first round. That could be interesting. I think Safulin's got enough firepower, though, to handle both guys. McDonald's had a down year, but that's fine. Not exactly a great hardcourt player by any means. Then potentially against Gaston, Eubanks, or Walton. So if it's Moutet in the second round, basically the same guy in back-to-back rounds. I think that Moutet and Gaston have a lot of similarities, besides just being French. But Safulin, I think, has a decent draw there into making it maybe into the quarters. I think that could be a decent draw for him. Might face off against Mickelson or against Echeverry. Think it's manageable. And you go down the line, you'd have to face off against either Borges, Morozin, Shevchenko, or Mannarino. Mannarino's been horrible, so I do want to kind of target that bottom half of the draw. I like Safulin at 16-1. He's never won a title either, so the first two guys I'm picking them to win their maiden ATP titles. But I think Safulin at 16-1 is a good price. I don't want to say a hardcourt specialist, but he's definitely at his best on hardcourt. He made a final last year, pushed Zverev to the brink, and he had a chance to win a title there. When he's on, he's very good, and Safulin has not been great recently, but his overall form recently has been, I'd say, an improvement. We'll put it that way. He's not really a great clay player, so the last couple of months have been kind of underwhelming, but that's understandable because he's definitely not a guy who's going to rack up a bunch of wins on the clay. So back on hard court and on grass. Grass, he was fine. I know he lost the marathon match to Berrettini in his first, or one of his first matches on grass, but he is off of a title, actually. Did go to a challenger event in the U.S., and he won. So the fact is he did just win a title, so it does seem like he's in good form. Did lose to Fokina in Montreal in the first round, but decided to try to, get some wins under his belt, and he won a title. So I do like the current form he's in, and winning a title I do think will build some confidence. 16-1, though, for a good draw, I think he's pretty favorable. If he gets past Moutet or McDonald in the second round, I think he's got a great chance to make it into the quarters of the semis. So I'll take him at 16-1 as my second choice. Now, for some of the other options, that I am going to skip over. So looking at those quickly, once again, I did think that you can make a case for a lot of people here, but Baez I didn't want. I'm not a fan of him facing off against George in the second round. And Baez, I do think, has not been playing great tennis recently. Not his fault. We know he's a clay guy, so him on grass is useless. And then he's going back to hard court. Hasn't really played many hard court matches recently, so I'm not exactly sold on the price there at 11-1. Said I'm skipping Cerundolo. Think that De Geer in the second round is not exactly a great spot for him, so that could be an early upset in theory. Rinderknech I'm not taking. I don't think he's good enough to win a title. Now, I do think that he can make a deep run. He's been fine recently, and I guess the argument is Ivashka won this title, so I guess anybody could win. But I'm not a big fan of Rinderknech. I think he's fine. I just don't see him actually going through an entire tournament. I think he's more of a 250 semifinalist peak kind of guy. I just don't see him being the kind of guy that would win a title. So I am going to skip Rinderknech at 19-1. Borges is interesting because he's been pretty good over the last couple of weeks. We saw him win a title on clay in Bastad over in Sweden. However, is he a great hardcourt player? Not really. He had a bunch of competitive matches in Cincinnati, including qualifying, where he went to 3 sets all the time, and then eventually lost to Rune in the, I believe, second round. Point is, though, he's been playing good tennis. His draw is not that bad. I think the matchup against Morozin, though, could be interesting in the third round. So that could be intriguing. Maybe Duckworth could beat Borges if they face off in the second round. 19-1, you can make an argument for, but I do think he is, in my opinion, not good enough to win the title here, just based on how deep the field is. The field might not have many top-tier talents, but they have a lot of guys who I think are pretty solid on hard court. Borges, I'm going to pass on. If you want to take him at 19-1, his draw is not bad because he has Mannarino in his immediate section, which definitely is a perk. But I'm not going to take him. He's been going to a bunch of 3 sets recently. I think he might stumble. I'm going to skip on Borges there. Mickelson is kind of, I don't want to put him in the Rinderknech camp because he's younger than Rinderknech, but it's kind of a similar situation where I know he made the final in Newport twice and he lost. I don't know if he's actually good enough on hard court to win a title at this stage in his career. He's still young. He can work on it. For a guy that size, he really should be a better server, and that's kind of what comes back to bite him in some of these matches. I think Mickelson's going to lose. I'm not picking him to win the event. If you wanted to make an argument for it, the main argument, I think, would be his overall draw. Just to briefly look into it just for a second. So Mickelson's draw is okay. He would have Fuchsovics or Daniel in the second round, then either Echeverry or Opelka, if you wanted to go for the rematch of that Newport semi where Mickelson killed Opelka. That could be a potential matchup there in the third round. Point is, though, I think Mickelson's draw is okay, but if you're asking me if I'd pick him or Safulin, for example, in a hypothetical matchup here in the later rounds, I'd probably take Safulin. So I'm not going to take Mickelson. I don't think he's good enough to actually beat some of the top-tier guys in this event, so I'm going to pass on him there. Morozin looked very good against Dimitrov. I don't know if I trust him enough. His second serve is very vulnerable, which can be a problem. Opelka's fascinating at 22-1. Opelka's got Bergs in the first round. Not easy for a first-round matchup. That might actually feature a couple breakers. Echeverry is kind of an interesting opponent for the second round because he's not a great hardcourt player. Has gotten better over the years, and we saw him almost beat Shelton in Cincinnati. So the point is he did face off against an elite server recently. Not as good as Opelka. In fact, calling Shelton an elite server is actually kind of I don't want to say a lie, but I might be an exaggeration. I might be exaggerating. He's an above average solid server. He's a solid server, and Echeverry did return decently against him. I think Opelka will actually play well here. So maybe you can make the argument that Opelka's got a shot. But Mickelson does kind of scare me after he just destroyed Opelka in the last head-to-head meeting. So I'm going to skip him too. This is going to take me, though, to my third option for the outrights, and I am going to go with a guy that I think has been really underwhelming this year, but the upside's there, and I think his game actually translates well to the courts in Winston-Salem. I'm going to go with Sonego at 29-1. Now, Sonego, I'm aware, is a head case, and he's had a hard time stringing together wins. He has been better recently. I do think if you're looking at an overall, I'd say, tournament for a guy like Sonego to win, an unpredictable guy with upside, I think this is the event. He's already won an ATP title on hard court before, so he's definitely been capable of getting through from start to finish. And you're looking at his matches recently, did beat Chorich in Cincinnati, did lose to Munar in 3, did beat Griekspoor in Montreal. He's been better recently, won a couple rounds in Umag. I'm not saying he's turned a corner, but I think 29-1 is a decent price for a guy who, when he's on, can beat arguably anybody in this field. As you can tell, I'm kind of taking some long shot flyers. I do think that it's a good tournament to do so. Decent draw for him, though, as a matchup against either Coria or Stricker in the second round. Both guys have not been very good this year. Coria, we know, is a clay court specialist. He's really useless on hard court. Stricker's really done nothing since the U.S. Open last year, for example. But it's a decent matchup for him in the second round. Then either Shang or Navone in the next round. Decent overall draw. And then you face off against either Sarundalo or Kotov. I think that Sonego could have the talent to upset one of those guys, but I'm going to go 29-1. It's a tournament that I think is going to be very, very unpredictable. And with that being the case, you might have to invest in a head case or two. So give me Sonego at 29-1. Now, the last choice I had when I initially found the lines at like 7 in the morning, I saw him at 40-1. However, the line is kind of plummeted, and now he's mostly at 18-1, and I'm annoyed by it, but I ended up finding him at 29-1. I am going to go with Coric at 29-1. Now, Coric, you might remember, actually had the semis here last year, and then he lost in a heartbreaker, final set breaker to Baez, who eventually won the tournament. So Coric has played well here in the past. We saw him make the semis last year, and he almost beat the champion. Point is, though, he's been playing better over the last couple of weeks. We know Coric was on a pretty decent losing streak for the last couple of months, but he has kind of turned a corner. Now, he did lose early on to Sonego in Cincinnati, but he did make a deep run in Montreal, did win a couple rounds there, beat Mensick, I know Martinez isn't exactly an impressive, that was actually in qualifying, but he ended up beating Martinez in the first round, then he got matched up against Sinner. Nothing you can do there. Point is, though, he has been playing better recently, and the fact that he made the semis, and the fact that his overall game, I think, does translate well to Winston-Salem, because you're looking at his overall game, and when he's on, the serve can be pretty good, his backhand's pretty solid, and his forehand's pretty good. The issue is consistency, but I do think if he's starting to play better tennis, he definitely has the ability to make a deep run. Now, the problem is he does face off against Baez in the second round, does face off against Nagal in about 5-10 minutes, and Nagal is not exactly known for being a good hardcore player, so Coric should be able to get by that one. Baez, though, once again, has not played many hardcore matches recently, and that was a marathon they had last year. Coric could pull it off, and if that's the case, he faces off against either Dzanchulp or Kaza or Hichikata. Then you're looking at Rinderknech or Darderi. I think that he can handle it, and we know that Coric did win a 1,000 title in Cincinnati a couple years ago, so we know that he's definitely capable of getting the job done if he's in good form. But from what I saw in Montreal, it seemed like he was starting to regain his form a bit, and I do think it's a pretty good, I don't want to say buy low spot, but I'm investing in a pretty cheap option that I think could definitely show some dividends in the future. So I'm going to go Coric at 29-1. I wish I got 40-1. Most books, though, now have kind of moved to the 24 to 18-1 range. I found a 29-1, so I'm going to go with that as my last outright pick. So once again, expect the unexpected for this event. Don't put too much money on it, but kind of try to anticipate who you think has the upside to make deep runs. So once again, my picks for the outrights for Winston-Salem, I'm going to go with Shang at 10-1. I'm going to go with Safulin at 16-1. I'm going to go with Sonego at 29-1, and I'm going to also go with Coric at 29-1. That's going to wrap it up there for the outrights. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks for the first round. Full disclaimer, though, since matches are starting in about 5-10 minutes, I purposefully avoided the Sunday card. The lock and dog will be on Monday matches, so you have a lot of time to get your bets in. Wanted to make that clear before we go to break. So before we get into the actual lock and dog picks, I want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Rhythm, because football season's here. College football starts in a week, and they have models for college football and NFL. So you can go to Rhythm and get those models, create your own winning model by yourself, or let Rhythm do it for you. You can decide what stats matter to you, and Rhythm can help you build a custom model around it, or just let Rhythm and its predictive model do the heavy lifting. They also use ad projections from MIT data scientists to help you with your picks, and Rhythm already has you covered for NFL Week 1 and college football Week 0. So don't forget to check that out. A reminder, claim your set and free shot today by going to sportscampus.com, rhythmsportscampus.com, so RETHMM. We're also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down closer to first pitch, so you get killer last-minute deals. All-in prices viewed from your seat and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And a reminder, my favorite feature is actually the images of seat views, which helps you see the exact view you would be getting from a seat before you spend your money on it, so you can avoid any obstructions or any type of tickets that look good on paper, but unfortunately, once you actually sit down in your seats, you realize that you got finessed, and you ended up losing some money. So once again, check out that feature on Game Time, and a reminder to download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code SGPN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again, create an account, and redeem code SGPN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished going through the outrights for Winston-Salem. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. A reminder, no matches on Sunday. We are going to cover the matches for the lock and dog picks on Monday, because I'm aware of how early the matches are starting in proximity. Or I should say how close in proximity the matches are starting to this live stream. So either way, For the lock, I'm going to go to a matchup on Monday between the tournament favorite, according to FanDuel, in Shang, and he takes on Coleman Sanya. Give me Shang in straight sets at -120. Now, Shang has been in good form recently when healthy. He has won 6 of his last 8 hardcourt matches, and 5 of those 6 wins were in straight sets. So when he does win, he tends to win comfortably. We saw him beat Shelton in straight sets. He's had a couple good wins on hardcourt recently, and he got injured, which is why he ended up having to retire against Rinderknecht. He's taking a couple weeks off, should be healthy, and I do think he's in line for a good showing here in the first round. Now, Coleman Sanya, we did see him make a good run in Wimbledon before eventually losing to Musetti. Point is, though, he has not really played many hardcourt matches recently. He, in fact, has not played a hardcourt match since the Australian Open qualifying. So he's not played a hardcourt match since July. So I do think he's in line to struggle. Shang, we know, has some firepower on the forehand side. He's not exactly the best server, but he's fine. Coleman Sanya is a decent server, but I do think that his overall, I'd say, comfortability is going to be non-existent on hardcourt because he's been busy playing clay for the last couple months, like most Argentinians do. So point is, I do think Coleman Sanya is going to struggle, but if you're going to give me a tournament favorite to win in straight sets against a guy who has not played on hardcourt in about 8 months, then I do think that it's a pretty good price at -120. So that's going to be my lock for the show. For my dog, I am going to kind of take the same approach, but take a different guy. I'm going to look at another Argentinian who has not played on hardcourt in a while. I'm going to fade him. I'm going to fade Coria. Give me Stricker in straight sets at +110. Now, Coria has not played a hardcourt match since the Australian Open, so unlike Coleman Sanya, he actually made it into the main draw, did lose in the first round. Point is, though, Coria is just not a great hardcourt player. Main reason, he can't serve. I think we all know this. He is a clay guy because it helps mask the serve. He loves to rally, and yes, Stricker might end up being forced into some unforced errors, but Stricker has a lot of firepower. And we saw it in the U.S. Open last year as he made the round of 16. His serve is very solid. He definitely has the ability to volley as well. And I just think that with his overall, I'd say, pace on his shots and on his serve, Coria is going to struggle, in my opinion, to actually effectively return in this matchup, and he can't serve. So Stricker, despite not being a great returner, I think will have chances in this matchup, and I do think that he can capitalize on a guy who has also not played many matches in general, not just on hardcourt, but on any surface, because Coria's only played 1 match since January 23rd. So he's basically played 1 match in about a month. So he might be a bit rusty, and I do think with that being the case, he might be in line to look extremely flat in this matchup. But you have a guy who's been successful, historically speaking, on hardcourt, a guy that has really not played on hardcourt in months, and a guy that's not played really any matches in a month. So I think it's a good spot for Stricker. Yes, I know that he tends to drop some sets, but I think it's a good price of +110, so I'm going to go with that as my dog. So once again, my plays for the show, the lock's going to be on Chang to win in straight sets against Coleman Sanya at -120. And my dog's going to be on Stricker to win in straight sets against Coria at a +110. Going to fade the 2 clay court specialist Argentinians in the first round here in Winston-Salem. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. Reminder, they'll be back once again for the quarterfinals in this event. It's not a 1,000, and it's not a Grand Slam, so we are not going to be covering round by round. We'll be back for the quarters in Winston-Salem. However, we have an episode before that. We have the final in Cincinnati. So we're going to wait for the matches between Zverev and Sinner, as well as the match between Rune and Tiafoe to conclude on Sunday, and then we'll preview the final once the odds come out, which should be taking place on Monday. Either way, though, until next time, find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio, find me on the NBA show, find me on the MLB show, the WNBA show as well. Until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.